and I'll be your guide for the duration of this journey. Actually, questions, comments, opinions are welcome. And this is going to be a walking tour that's going to take us about 40 minutes. But then I'll first give you a brief history about this building, tell about the transatlantic slave trade before we start with the walking tour. So then, firstly, I will officially welcome you by saying Akwaba. Akwaba means welcome. I know you're familiar with the word Akwaba. Then you respond Midasi. Yes, so Akwaba. Perfect. This is the Cape Coast Slave Castle, and this happens to be the third castle that the Europeans erected along the shores of Ghana. Actually, the first castle that they built on our land happens to be the St. George's Castle or the Elmina Castle. Elmina Castle was built by the Portuguese around 1482. The second one is in Accra. That is the Christiansborg Castle or the Osi Castle. Yes, that was built by the Danish in the year 1661, and thus this is the third or the last castle built by the British in the year 1664. So then this castle that you see, this has been standing for 361 years. So you can just imagine how long it took them to complete everything that you see. And anytime I say the British built this castle, it sounds a little dicey and debatable, just because the actual labor used in building the castle was us. So we can say we built this. And you may start to ask yourself the reason why the Europeans came to Africa in the first place. You know, the Europeans had so many reasons for coming. Some came as exploiters, some came to expand in their territories, some came as missionaries to spread Christianity, some came in search of free human labor and also for gold. Everything started when the Spaniards got onto the New World, that is America. When they got onto the New World, gold, silver mines were open. They started to establish huge plantations, and some of the plantations was tobacco, coffee, cotton, sugarcane. Initially, they were using the natives of America known as the Red Indians on those lands. But then due to tropical diseases, these natives were dying in numbers. So then there was one Catholic priest, one of their kind, named Bartholomew de las Casas. He was the one who suggested and recommended the use of Africans to the Europeans. He said Africans are naturally strong. We stand tropical diseases, we work under similar climatic conditions. Africans are naturally good at farming, so then we will be the best candidate to work on the plantations for them. And you know, some around 1512, a couple of black people were taken from places from Africa to places such as Santo Domingo, present-day Haiti, just to be tested on these plantations. And truly, these black people proved very strong on those plantations when they got there. And since then, that brought a rise in the demand of Africans. The unfortunate story of misery and pain. The forced exit of Africans taken from their motherland to a place that was not unknown to them. Actually, the Europeans built about 60 forts and castles in the whole of West Africa. And out of the 60 forts and castles that they built, Ghana alone, we had about 40 of them. About 80% all because of gold. Yes, just because of the vast quantity of gold that we had, they gave our nation a name, and that was the Gold Coast. That is how come they erected these European structures along the shores of Ghana just for the exportation of gold. But you know, unfortunately, the demand for gold shifted to the demand for human labor when they started making money from the slave trade. So then the structures that were built purposely for the gold, all of them were converted into slave dungeons, where millions of Africans on the African continent were captured and they were made to occupy these structures. I understand Cape Coast Castle was the headquarters for the British slave trade activities in the whole of West Africa. So then wherever that they capture you, you need to be brought down here. This was their transit quarters. So then you stay here, wait for the ships to come before they take you away to the New World. And over here, captives that were brought in here, they were not only from Ghana. They captured people as far as Burkina Faso, Senegal, Mali, Nigeria, Niger, Benin, Gambia, Togo, Cote d'Ivoire. And all these people who were captured from all the places, they were made to walk barefooted from wherever that they captured them down to where we are standing. You can imagine the distance. Imagine walking all the way from Senegal barefooted down to Ghana. And not even just Ghana, but in the southern part of Ghana. Actually, millions of our people died on their way to this castle. Those who used to come, they were beaten mercilessly. Some were tied to trees, some were eaten by wild animals. And those who actually entered Ghana from the northern part actually made their first stop at the biggest slave market, that is Salaga, located in the northern region of Ghana. Over there, they have to force them through a nature reserve full of wild animals. And that nature reserve is currently known as the Mole National Park. Over there, the slave masters realized their commodities were getting lost just because the wild animals were feeding on the enslaved Africans. That is why the European slave masters have to look through our ancestors who were put in chains and shackles. Anyone that showed signs of weakness have to be pulled out. They walk them to certain meters, they strip them off, tie them to trees, and whip their backs. As the blood flows, it attracts the wild animals. They feed on them, then they quickly get the rest out of the pack. They succeeded, but their lives were lost. They continued their journey, met another community called Asenmanto. In that community, we have a slave market over there, and within the slave market, there is a river. Captives were given the opportunity to at least take their last bath as Africans. They were given food, water to drink just to regain their strength. Their hairs and beards were shaved with broken bottles just because some of them had gray hairs. Oil was applied on their whole body for them to look attractive and young, so that when they bring them to this castle, they'll look attractive and presentable for the merchants in here to buy them. And interestingly, they were not buying humans with money. You know, the value and the worth of Africans that were brought here as slaves were just lowered to the exchange of cheap European commodities, such as hair comb, mirror, gunpowder, tobacco, canned food, European clothes, textiles, leather shoes, whiskey, necklace, and toffees. These were the cheap items that they were using to exchange our people. And right after the exchange, all the captives were brought down to the courtyard just to be branded. Over here, they have to line all of them up. You know, all the slaves didn't belong to one merchant or one company. There were so many European companies that were coming over to buy slaves. So then each company had its own name, the initials, or even a symbol beneath a piece of metal. So then they set fires here, insert the branded metals in fire, wait for it to become red and hot. Now, straight from the fire for a man, they first apply palm oil on this side of your body, and straight from the fire, they stamp the hot metal to your chest. For a woman, at your back, of the side of your hand for easy identification. And from there, they separated the men from the women. All men were moved in here. All women were taken down to the female dungeons. They had to stay in the dungeons maximum for 3 solid months, minimum some days to a month, depending the arrival of their ships before they were sent away to the New World. So actually, this is a brief history I have for you about this building and the transatlantic slave trade. But then before we start with the journey, I would like to ask you one question. You know, if our ancestors who were put in chains and shackles, who had to walk for 1,000 to 2,000 kilometers journey, had to be staying in these dungeons with the feces, urine, blood, everything, had not survived all the way to the New World, for us, where would we be? If you begin to think about this, a lot of things actually get into your mind. You begin to realize every single height that you are, every single achievement in your life today was from their struggle. They allowed you to climb up to their shoulders for you to get to wherever that you are today. So as we are embarking on this journey, this shouldn't be an ordinary journey for you. This is an ancestral journey. It is a spiritual journey that we are embarking. Down here, it is not just a physical space. It is a spiritual space. It is an ancestral space. We have the souls and spirits of our ancestors who suffered and died down into dungeons. We are moving straight down here. We have 4 steps down. The last one drops a little bit, and the floors are a bit slippery. So please take your time as we move down here. All right.
One question for
Okay.
you. So, you said they were coming to capture us. So, who allowed them to capture us? Didn't we have? Because you said like we were strong and this, and so where was the fight for?
Actually, yeah, that is a very good question. Yes. Let me actually take you back. You know, processes by which one was made to serve another was with all the races in the time past. In that sense, we Africans, we had an idea of slavery before the foreigners came. I don't even term it, sorry, as slavery. It is actually an indentured servant, indentured servitude. You know, back in the days, Africa didn't have anything like Ghana, Nigeria, Mali, Togo, Burkina Faso. There were tribes, ethnic groups, communities. And because each tribe wanted to expand its territories, they were fighting themselves, intertribal wars. One tribe will have to fight the other. The one who conquers takes dominion over the people in their land. They don't enslave them, they just fuse them into their system. So from time to time, one tribe will grow from a village to become a community, from a community to become a state, from a state to become a kingdom, and from a kingdom to become an empire. They were actually not putting people in dungeons. It was quite unfortunate when the Westerners actually sailed across the Atlantic Ocean, all in the name of exploring. That is where everything actually changed. You know, when they got here, they saw Africans fighting, and it became a good opportunity for them. At that same time, the Europeans had gotten to America, where it is being termed as the New World, where they were growing plantations in large scale. And because they didn't want to work hard on their own plantations, initially they were using natives of America, known as the Red Indians. But then they realized that the Red Indians were dying due to tropical diseases, due to the weather conditions, and they were not fit enough. So then that is why the Catholic priest suggested the use of Africans to the Europeans in replacement of the Red Indians. That is how come they ended up here. So when they got here, seeing Africans fighting, it became a good opportunity for them. Actually, Africans were fighting with inferior weapons, such as stone, knife, sword, bow, and arrow. The Europeans said, why don't they become the engineers of our wars? They will give us weapons to fight, introducing us to guns and gunpowders for us to become more powerful. But then if they give us these ammunitions, we have to give them something in exchange of those ammunitions. So then they proposed for the prisoners of wars. So then when two tribes fight, the one who conquers will have to take over only the properties, but then sell the people, sell the prisoners of war to the Europeans as slaves. So then the more we fight, the more they get prisoners of war. This continued for a longer period of time, and at some point, they were not getting the number that they wanted. So then they started to kidnap and raid by themselves, where they could set a whole community like Cape Coast on fire. As people ran for their lives, they capture them, bring them here. You'll be quietly sleeping in your room. By the time you realize you're no more in your room, parents will be cultivating land, their children will be sitting behind them. By the time you tend to check on your children are gone. And mind you, we the black people, we also played a role in the slave trade. I know you've been hearing people saying Africans sold their brothers and sisters into slavery. Yes, there was a form of transaction. They gave us ammunitions. We also gave them prisoners of wars. So then there was a form of transaction. If we hadn't given them the prisoners of war, or we hadn't taken the ammunitions, that would be actually a different story. But then there was a form of exchange. That is how come people would say Africans sold their brothers and sisters into slavery. And talking about percentage-wise, the number of people that was selling black people to the Europeans as slaves, the percentage actually can't sum up to even 5%. About 90% of those who ended up in dungeons were forcefully kidnapped and raided by the Europeans themselves. That is how come they ended up in the dungeons.
Makes sense.
All right, yes. Let us begin the walking tour down here. Please be careful, the floors are very slippery. Sorry. Right, so we're moving here.